Fronius Inverter Service and Maintenance. Hello and welcome everybody. It's indeed a pleasure to have you attending once again our webinar. And today we will be treating the topic Fronius Inverter Service and Maintenance. In this webinar, we intend to give you information on how best to get adequate service and maintenance of your Fronius inverter. And with me to present this webinar today, my colleagues from South Africa and Kenya. Mohammed Sidat is a technical sales advisor for Southern Africa, based in Johannesburg, South Africa, of course. David Mwangi is a technical sales advisor for Eastern Africa, based in Nairobi, Kenya. And myself, Cyprian Okolo, the technical sales advisor for Western Africa, based in Lagos, Nigeria. So together, we will be presenting this webinar and hope you will all enjoy what we have for you today. So without further ado, let's have a look at what we have on our agenda today. We'll be taking a look at proper inverter installation, inverter software updates, status error codes, SOLAR.WEB and remote service, troubleshooting, SOLAR.SOS, which is one of our recent new apps that was released a couple of weeks ago. And then we'll be looking at the Fronius System Partnership, that is the FSP. We'll now take a look at component exchange and replacement. And of course, we'll have a look at Fronius installer search. And afterwards, we'll have further information for you. So to start, we'll now go through proper inverter installation, and we'll be looking at the snap inverter installation. Great. And the good thing is that from all the positive feedbacks we've been getting from all our installers, they've had wonderful experience with our snap inverter, especially in terms of the installation, because it is fast and easy. It has a lightweight wall bracket, which can easily be mounted. It consists of a connection area that is fully integrated into the wall bracket. It is compact, and our systems are basically lightweight in design, which makes it pretty much very, very favorable with respect to our competitors. It is also easy to mount it on the pole in case there's no wall to mount, just like you can see in the illustration shown here. All you need is a DIN rail, a specified DIN rail, and a U-clip. With that, you would have your inverter installed on a pole. And another fantastic thing is that there are no special tools required for the installation. So long as you have your preparations done, all you need is your screwdriver, screw down the wall mount bracket, connect the cables, fit in the inverter device, or as we fondly call, snap in the inverter device onto the wall bracket, and then fit in the DATCOM cover, and then of course turn on the DC disconnector, and you are done with the installation. So it's that fast and that easy. Yes, it also has easy servicing, fast and easy servicing, of course, because of its straightforward updates and upgrades that are also possible via memory stick. And of course, the PC board replacement is also fast and easy. But of course, we specify that only trained personnel are supposed to handle PC board replacement. So this makes device replacement and general troubleshooting very, very possible within minutes. Great. So now let's talk about choosing the right location for installation. Yes, our devices come with IP65 and 66 ingress protection class, so it can be installed outdoors. But then we strongly recommend that it should not be installed under direct sunlight, because this would affect the ambient temperature tolerance of the inverter. Although our inverter have a very, very high tolerance, but then because of the possibility of it affecting its performance, it is best advised not to install it under direct sunlight. If it must be installed outdoors, it is preferred to be installed maybe under the modules, under the installed modules, of course. Yes, under the shade of the installed modules. Yeah, in terms of altitude altitude, our systems can actually go be installed in areas of altitude as high as 2,000 meters above sea level. So beyond that, would have some adaptations in terms of the VDC. Then we also recommend that our products not to be installed in especially places where it come in direct contact with toxic substances like acids and the likes, especially in industry. So if it must be installed in these places, it should be installed where there won't be direct contact with such substances. In terms of living rooms, we recommend that it shouldn't be installed in living rooms because of generally because of the sound that the fan makes during when it is actively cooling the inverter. So because we all have different noise tolerance levels, so we advise that it shouldn't be installed in living rooms. Because the dungs or the waste of livestock generally contain ammonia, which is also toxic, we advise that it shouldn't be installed close to livestock. Yes, dusty and misty surfaces are also advised not to have our products installed on. And of course, same goes to greenhouses. Because of its enclosed nature, of course, the ambient temperature will be high and might affect the performance of our inverter. Yes, so now let's talk about inverter orientation. So basically, you can install inverters vertically, horizontally, or diagonally as illustrated here. So any other orientation apart from this is strongly prohibited per se. So because we've seen quite a lot, but then yeah, so let's follow the basic and simple rules of installation: vertical, horizontal, and upward diagonal, of course. Good. So what do we need for proper preparation, proper inverter installation preparation? We basically need a screwdriver, like I mentioned earlier, installation manual, and a USB stick, that is if you have to do software update. And we advise or recommend a screwdriver that has an adjustable torque, and the recommended torque is 1.5 to 2.5 Newton meter. So in terms of manuals, we have three kinds of manuals. We have the installation manual that comes without texts. So they come with well illustrated symbols and guidelines, and they're usually delivered with inverter. And then we have the installation manual that comes as a full version with text description, and it's always available for download. And also we have operational manual, which is strictly a text version, and it's also available for download. You can visit or use the web link below to have a look at the manuals I've just told you about. Great, so now let's talk about clearance. So basically for small SIMOs and primos, a clearance of 150 millimeters is advised for the space between the inverter and the ceiling upwards, and then a clearance of 200 millimeters from the inverter to the sidewall. In the case where you're installing more than one inverter side by side, please ensure that the gap or the space between the inverters is not less than 100 millimeters, as can be seen in the illustration. This is, of course, to enable the inverter to cool itself effectively, because we implement active cooling, where cold air or cool air comes into the inverter via the sides, and then the hot air goes off from the top. Okay, so for big SIMOs, the clearance level is 200 millimeters upwards, and then 100 millimeters sideways. Then for installation side by side, the gap between inverters should not be less than 100 millimeters. Good. So this is because we have actually seen a thing or two, which is why we are actually giving these guidelines. As you can see, if inverters are not properly installed or if the guidelines are not followed properly, this could happen. These also could happen, and of course this. So, which is why we recommend, for this case in particular, I guess excessive force or maybe a drill was used. So, it's actually exerted more than the necessary pressure or force that was required to screw the inverter. So let's take note of all the guidelines that have been clearly stated previously, and then of course we'll definitely have a successful installation of our inverters. So let's now look at, because we've been dealing with SNAP inverters, and because we also have our Gen 24 Plus inverters in the market, the SIMO. Of course, we'll be expecting the primos in the coming weeks. Now have a look at the installation instructions for Gen 24 inverters. So for both Primo and SIMO Gen 24 Plus inverters, they can of course be installed indoors and outdoors. And of course it has temperature tolerance range of -40 to 60 degrees centigrade, that is for the Primo, and then -25 to 60 degrees centigrade for the SIMO. So of course, 0 to 100% permitted humidity is of course one of the features. And then in this case, as you can see, it has a higher altitude tolerance level compared to the SNAP inverters. So for the Primo, it can be installed at altitude of up to 4,000 meters above sea level. And then for the SIMOs, it's 3,000 meters above sea level. Choice of installation site is still the same thing with regards to the SNAP inverters. Yeah, it can be installed indoors or outdoors, but preferably under a shade. That is, if it's installed outdoors. This here describes the altitude that I've talked about earlier, 4,000 meters above sea level for the Primo. Okay, so the rest don'ts are all applied as it is for the SNAP inverters. So we have the do's here and we have the don'ts here. So for the don'ts, they are basically the same thing with the SNAP inverters as earlier explained. Great. So inverter orientation is not different also. Vertical installation, horizontal installation, and then upward diagonal installation are allowed. Any other installation orientation is prohibited or not advised. Good. So in terms of the clearance for both the SIMO and the Primo Gen 24 Plus, the clearance upward is 193 millimeters, sorry, and then the sideways is 225 millimeters, and then side-by-side installation is a minimum of 170 millimeters from the wall mount bracket, and then clearance downwards should be a minimum of 300 millimeters from the wall mount bracket, as can be seen described here. Yes, so the same thing applies with the Primo, as we can see also. Good, so now let's look at status and error codes. So basically, status or state codes, as they're fondly called, gives us the state at which our inverters are in. And as can be seen in this particular illustration, we have a state code 307, which is basically described as a DC load or low DC voltage. So possibly this came up as a result of an overcast, or maybe it's a nighttime and there's no irradiation. So definitely there'll be low DC voltage coming from the PV generator. And of course, the state code comes up. So that's how state codes are actually handled by our inverters. So, but then we have different classes of state codes. We have class 1, class 3, class 4, 5, 7, and then 10 to 12, as explained here. Transient error, temporal error, and then other states or classes of errors, as explained here for us to see. Good. So looking at the service menu basically gives us codes that can be used to access some certain features on the inverter, features or settings. So we have the start code, the key code, error counter, country setup menu, and of course service menu basic code. So we'll be taking a look at each of them. And with the start code is 78278. With this, we can access settings for language, country setup, time, and date. For the key lock menu, or for the key menu, it's 12321. For the error counter, which gives us the error codes for different days, and all the entire error codes is a 37767. I must say here that there's no need to memorize these codes because they can easily be accessed. All you need to know is the word that has to do with the code that you want to access. So for error, if you have a look at your phone tabs or your dial codes, you will be able to decode the error code if you match the respective numbers with the respective words, as can be seen here. That's for error, for example. Okay, so same with country setup menu. The code is 73887. So there are of course different codes to access different service menu for our inverters. So, but then there's a special menu called the professional menu, which isn't accessible for everyone. It is basically only accessible for specified or trained installers or technicians, because there are sensitive settings here that must be taken note of, because if these settings are imputed wrongly, then the whole system might be in trouble per se. So if there's any need for any installer to get this code, he would have to contact our technical support for them to now send a one-off code, which they would now use to access these respective settings. Good. So so far has been for the SNAP inverters. So now let's look at the status and error codes for the Gen 24. And alas, as we can see, the Gen 24 Plus inverter doesn't have any display. So we now use the LED status as the state code notification mode. So as we can see, there are different modes which translate to different states that the inverter is in. And it tells it from the two LED displays that are situated in between the touch sensitive button here. So taking, for example, startup simply means that the operational LED flashes green while the communication LED is a solid yellow. So with this, you will know that the system is starting up. And if we take updates in progress, for example, it simply connotes that the two LEDs will be flashing blue. So that is an indication that there is an update going on. So, and if I may ask, or if this were a quiz, I would ask which LED status now shows the normal operation of the Fronius Gen 24 Plus series? And the quick answer to that will be green and blue, because green and blue here simply indicates or tells us that the inverter is running and the network is connected. Good. So that's for state codes, and then for look at some error codes. So in the same vein, we tend to use the two LEDs for error codes also, as you can see in the illustration here. So for error messages, error state codes then appears on in Fronius SOLAR.WEB and in the inverter dashboard of our monitoring device. So once this comes, it comes as a 4-digit code with a short description, just like we saw on a state code 307 of the inverter display we had in the previous slides. Yes, so it will come to short description of what the 4-digit code means. Yes, so in this case, there are no code groups. As we saw, there are 3-digit codes for the snap inverters. So in this case, it's a 4-digit code. So it's not, the state code group is not available here for the Gen 24 as is with the snap inverters. Yeah, so and the state codes will be created in ascending order as they hit your monitoring device or your status or the web user interface on SOLAR.WEB. Yeah, so this can also, or we can also read errors through Fronius.SOS tool, which is one of our latest apps that were launched a couple of weeks ago, and of course through the Fronius state code tool. Great. So at this point, I would like to hand over to my colleague, David Mwangi, who will be taking you on for the rest of the presentation. So David, if you're on, please, you may continue.
Okay, thank you so much, Cyprian. So I'll be taking over from this point. If you can give me the presenter rights to be able to continue. But before we do, I go on with my part of the presentation. Of course, we'll be launching 2 polls. Just to get a rough idea of your experience as far as maintenance and repair of inverters is concerned. So let me now launch the first poll. And this is asking you, how do you know when your solar inverter isn't operating properly? So the choices are, you get a call from the end customer, or you get to know when you do planned visits to these sites, or through remote monitoring. So we appreciate if you could kindly give us your feedback on this question. So I'm going to leave it on for the next 20 seconds or so, and then close it and share the results with you. Okay, so just about 10 seconds, then we see the results. I see quite a good number of you have already been able to submit your feedback. So I'm closing it now and sharing the results. So from the feedback from our attendees today, we can see that a big proportion of our attendees today are quite proactive in terms of remote monitoring, and they get to know about inverters not working properly through online portals or remote monitoring platforms. Another portion, which is significantly lower, is getting a call from the end customer, and even a much lower percentage, they get to know that a solar inverter is not working when they do a site visit. So it's quite encouraging to know or to see that a good number of you are already familiar with remote monitoring platforms. So let's now continue with the rest of the presentation before I hand over to my colleague Mohammed much later. And we start off with inverter software updates. So inverter software updates become part of an important procedure when you're looking to have your inverters operating optimally in the field. So sometimes just a simple software update is able to fix any problems that you might be encountering in the field. And also, in addition, we do recommend that if your inverter has been sitting in your warehouse for a relatively long period of time and you're going to site to do the installation, it might be a good idea to have the latest software update with you to be able to have a smooth operation of the inverter. And therefore, this also affects the operation and maintenance of your systems. So for the SNAPINVERTER series, how to run a software update, this is a very straightforward process. And even without a connection to the internet, you can download the latest software updates and store these in a memory stick. And once you have your inverter powered up, then you go to the setup menu that you can navigate through the display of the inverter. And then you are going to scroll down to the section that says using the buttons, software update, and select it. Then you're going to scroll down and select USB, because this is where you are going to be updating the software from. And you tap the enter button twice, and then your inverter will display boot message while update is performing. So once the update is complete, then the inverter will go into a blank screen momentarily, and then the master ready or wait master ready startup cycle will display once again. Also, this process of updating the inverter, once you have the inverters operating in the field, can be done remotely without going to site, directly from SOLAR.WEB. So therefore, SOLAR.WEB becomes a very important aspect of maintenance and operation or service of your inverters. So we're going to be looking at the details of how to do this through SOLAR.WEB in a few slides from now. As far as the Gen 24 plus inverters are concerned, this is the new series of Fronius hybrid or battery inverters, what you can call battery inverters. We do recommend that you update the software of the inverter the moment you do the first startup of the inverter. So once you power up the inverter for the very first time, we do recommend that you update the inverter's software. And because in most cases, what will happen is that you're going to use the solar.start app for commissioning the Gen 24 inverter, or what we call the inverter dashboard in your phone or laptop. You can download the update file, which you can get through this link. And this link is going to be shared together with this presentation later. But this is also available in the Fronius website. So you can easily get the latest software versions for the Gen 24 plus inverters directly from the Fronius website. And then once you have this saved, especially when you're using your laptop, you can easily drag it into the inverter dashboard or the commissioning wizard. And this is going to be updated directly into the Gen 24 plus inverters. Additionally, this can also be done remotely once the inverter is already installed and on site through SOLAR.WEB as well. So in terms of the solar.start and SOLAR.WEB applications, these are now also available as phone apps and can be downloaded from the Google Play Store as well as the Apple Store for iPhones. So let's look at now how to use SOLAR.WEB as a remote servicing device or platform. As you may know right now, SOLAR.WEB is the monitoring platform. For those who are not familiar, that so we do have a dedicated monitoring platform for all Fronius inverters. And you easily access it by just typing www.solarweb.com, and you are able to see, even when you don't have an account with us, you're able to see some demo systems already running in SOLAR.WEB. However, the prerequisite is to have a Fronius inverter with a data communication card in it. For the SNAPINVERTER series, we are talking about an inverter being able to communicate into SOLAR.WEB, provided it has the Data Manager 2.0 integrated, or the Fronius Gen 24 plus inverters with a communication card that you are calling now the pilot. So the Data Manager is for the SNAPINVERTER series, and the pilot is for the Gen 24 plus inverters. So the pilot will come integrated or embedded in the Gen 24 plus inverters as a standard. Also, additionally, for more detailed overview of your systems in SOLAR.WEB, we do recommend the connection of a smart meter into your system. But for Gen 24 plus inverters, for a system that is going to be used as a full backup system, that system must have a smart meter as a prerequisite as well. So how to bring your system into SOLAR.WEB? So if you already have other running systems in SOLAR.WEB, or then the process you need to follow is just to add a new system into your existing SOLAR.WEB account. However, if you are a new user, you've just done your very first system, you can easily do this by creating a new SOLAR.WEB account by following the steps that are provided in the solar.start app when you're using your mobile phone, or you can do this directly from the website using your desktop version of SOLAR.WEB, and this is for laptops and other similar devices. So it's a very simple process how to bring your systems into SOLAR.WEB. So like I've said, if you have an existing SOLAR.WEB account, you can add as many systems as you install in the future. But the starting process, of course, is to create a SOLAR.WEB account as an installer or an end customer. Integrated monitoring. So already as mentioned before, all the hardware required for monitoring inverters, Fronius inverters remotely is already integrated in the inverters. So the only exception here, something that I should highlight, is the fact that when you're using several SNAP inverters together, maybe you have 5 or 6 SNAP inverters in one system, then you only need one inverter with a data manager card integrated. So only one inverter in this case is going to be communicating to SOLAR.WEB. However, if you are going to use the Gen 24 plus inverters, each Gen 24 inverter is going to communicate directly or separately into SOLAR.WEB, regardless whether there are other SNAP inverters in the system that you have integrated the Gen 24 plus into. So the software is of course free of charge, and like I've already mentioned also, we highly recommend including also the Fronius smart meter, because this gives you a much better overview of your system and also allows for better comparison of performance, and gives you also an indication of if service for your inverters is required at any point. So the new SOLAR.WEB app, like I said, I have mentioned, this is also available as a phone app. And there isn't much difference between the desktop version and the phone app, because what you get in essence is a display of bubble charts of different kinds of parameters, energy flow and all that, current and historical data, as well as earnings. And you can easily download this, like I said, on Play Store or Apple Store, for depending on the kind of phone that you're using. And once you've done that, once you have downloaded the app into your phone, you just need to register into this app using your SOLAR.WEB account and password. If you have an existing SOLAR.WEB account, that is, and if you don't have an existing account, then you just simply create a new account. So remote service with SOLAR.WEB. So like I mentioned before, SOLAR.WEB becomes a very important tool for you to be able to do remote service and maintenance of your inverters. So the starting point is, of course, to understand that SOLAR.WEB offers different levels of access to different types of users. As we can see in this permissions section, we have different levels. Level number 1 is, of course, the owner of the system, who has the overall right. He can access every part of SOLAR.WEB. And then we have the supervisor level, who is nearly has the same rights as the owner of the system. And then we have the guest, who can only view the dashboard of SOLAR.WEB. So to be able to carry out a remote maintenance of your systems, you need to be either an owner or supervisor of the system. So what can you do as far as remote service is concerned? You can, first of all, do a very important process, which is the software update. So this can be done remotely, and we're going to look at how to do this in the next slide. This is only one click is required, either when you are using the data manager for the SNAP inverters or the pilot for Gen 24 plus inverters, and also for another gadget that we call the Home Pilot, that is specially made for heating applications using PV. In terms of the messaging center, this is also very important for service and maintenance of your inverters to know what is happening in the field. So it gives you a history of all the service messages that your inverter has sent out to SOLAR.WEB, and you can actually see the historical breakdown of the messages that are coming through, as well as the brief description of these messages and the state codes. Also importantly, you can do data comparison. Like I've mentioned, you can have an inverter or a system that has several inverters connected, and SOLAR.WEB allows you to have an overview of each inverter's performance. So if you do realize that there is one inverter that is lagging behind the performance of other similar related inverters, then this can actually mean that something needs to be done on site. But of course, this is something that is very valuable because you're able to decode this kind of a situation even before you make a planned trip to site. Also, for inverters that have more than one MPPT, if you have like the SIMO 20 installed that has 2 MPPTs, you're able also to analyze and compare data at MPPT level to know whether one MPPT is performing better than the other. And therefore, it could mean that the array connected to one of the MPPT is either shaded or has a lot of dust cover on it. And this, of course, would be an indication that some level of service would be required for the system to come back to 100% performance. So in terms of the software update, what do you need to do? It's a very simple process, like I've mentioned. When you have a SOLAR.WEB account open, you go to settings, then components, and then under components, you're going to be able to see all the devices that you have installed in that particular system. On the right-hand corner, you can see a section that says update here, and you can, the exploded version here, you can see the installed software version and the available software version. So in this case, the installed software version is 1.0.24-1, but we have a more recent version of software available, which is 0.25-3. And therefore, all you do remotely is to select that you want to do the update by confirming on this tick button, and then you click on the update button. And the only thing that you have to ensure is that you have a stable internet connection where your inverter is located, because sometimes the software update can take up to 15 minutes, and you want to be sure that your software update process will be successful. So, and this applies for both for all the devices that you may have connected. It doesn't matter whether it's the Gen 24 Plus inverter, the OnPilot, or the Gen 24 Plus inverter, and additionally also for our Tauro series of inverters that we are going to be availing into the market in the next couple of months. So when to start a remote software update, what do we recommend? So we have to do this always for different components, and this ensures proper data communication from your Fronius inverters, whether the OnPilot and also the overall system. But as a recommendation from Fronius, we recommend that you keep the update, the software always up to date for best or optimal performance. So anytime you go into SOLAR.WEB and you realize that there is a new software version available, we recommend that you carry out this update remotely. Just be sure that you have a stable internet connection, like I've mentioned, to ensure that you have a smooth software update when you are doing it remotely. In terms of the message center, already mentioned this briefly, but just go briefly over it again. You go to SOLAR.WEB and you're going to see service messages, and other service messages, you can see all the messages that have come through, whether they are error messages or other types of messages that the inverter has sent out. And in this particular case, we are looking at a service message from an OnPilot installed in a system. And the status code that is showing here is state code 921. And this would have the description that the temperature sensor not connected or defective. So when this now gives you an indication whether you really need to go to site to check on the temperature sensor, or you need to check with your installation team whether really a temperature sensor was fitted or not. So like I said, SOLAR.WEB becomes such a valuable tool for you to be able to minimize also on your maintenance trip to site, and also be able to know how optimally your system is performing. So in addition, once you now have a history of messages, you can do a detailed analysis of the causes of these state codes as displayed in SOLAR.WEB. And the way to do this is by using our Fronius Solar Online Support tool, which we are going to be looking at in the next few slides as well. So let's now go into the Fronius Solar Online Support tool. So, and the benefits that as an installer or an end user you can get from this tool. So this tool is, of course, a self-service portal, online portal for all our technicians and customers. It's available 24/7 without any waiting periods. And therefore, this means that you also do not require to go through our tech support department in Austria. So it also encompasses a messaging function with tech support with case messages. Also push notifications, e.g. info on current order status, maybe for spare parts and things like that. It also gives you access to all relevant installation and operating instructions. It also has provision for data query and warranty information. So if you have inverters already installed, using the Solar Online Support tool, or what we call as Fronius SOS, you're able to query whether your inverters are fully registered for different warranties. As you know, in different parts of Africa or all over the world, Fronius offers different levels of warranty, and therefore using Solar SOS, you can confirm whether your inverter is really properly registered for the appropriate warranty. Also, case history and troubleshooting are also very useful for SOS. Rapid request of replacement parts, so you don't need to do a separate email for you to be able to get the appropriate replacement parts. All you have to do is to, through the case number created in Solar Online Support, forward that particular request for replacement parts, which is going to be reviewed by our tech support department in Austria, and therefore the exchange process starts like that. So also the SOS is available as a phone app and as well as a desktop app. So we highly recommend all our installers and also to some extent end users to download this app. It's free of charge, and be able to diagnose the state codes that might be experienced by your systems from time to time. So how does this SOS app look like? So as I mentioned already, can be used as the desktop version, or also an app that you can download from Google Play Store or App Store. But it basically gives you an overview of your system and has different kinds of sections that you're going to look into just now. So this is the desktop version of the SOS app, how it looks like. So you can have a section for cases, device data, exchange or repair. Then you have an area for manuals, installer support page, and all these other very useful tools in it. So key features of the Solar SOS, the main features would be that this is 100% digital. You don't need any written declarations of consent. And also very important, you are going to be able to register into the SOS platform using the IAM, the Fronius IAM. So this is a new process or procedure whereby you do not need different credentials for different Fronius, let's say, accounts. So if you have an existing SOLAR.WEB account, you can use the same credentials using Fronius IAM to register into Fronius SOS platform. So also there is a step-by-step instructions on successful service, available updates, as well as you can manage different kinds of accounts. So if you are working for two companies, you are one technician working for two companies, you're able to operate SOS to fit the two operations. Or if you are one company, of course, this is a very similar common scenario that one company is serving very many customers. You don't need a separate account for each of the customers that you're working for. You're going to use one account for all the customers that you are servicing. Other features that are related to SOS, messages related to the created case. As you can see here, we have a case number already. This is how it would look like when you have it as a phone app. Then you have direct contact to tech support if this is required eventually. And if you have case that you need to claim a warranty on, maybe an exchange for a PC board, you can attach photos and other attachments as, let's say, evidence of what needs to be changed. Then this offers also a very simple communication path and notification platform into Fronius tech support. Other things that I mentioned that I'm not going into details about, you can also get YouTube videos access directly from the SOS app. And also, like I mentioned before, installation instructions, manuals, and all these kind of useful, let's say, device documents, right, from SOS. So you can also see all your cases historically. You can have a filter function, e.g. by time period or by inverter type. And all you need when you are creating a case in Fronius SOS is actually just the device ID, what you call the registration number of the inverter. And then you can see any case that you want to scroll through, warranty conditions, and also you can straight from SOS get the system name from SOLAR.WEB. So this, like I said, is going to be a very helpful platform for you as an installer. In Africa, currently, we have quite a number of our partners already using SOS very successfully, and this has made their work very easy. As you can see, I'm quite sure from different parts of Africa, you might recognize a few of them. And so far, we have about 70 FSPs spread out across Africa. In terms of now going the next step and looking at the best process for exchange of components, how does this happen? As an installer, you are the best positioned person to be able to advise or to troubleshoot your systems in terms of when a replacement is required. And this is going to most likely happen by getting a call from your customer or error message analysis from SOLAR.WEB. And then you go into SOS and analyze what this problem means. If this is not possible for you to analyze or troubleshoot on your own, you have a direct hotline into tech support. And if you are an FSP Plus partner, then you have a priority when you're calling hotline, and you don't have to be in a queue when you make a call into tech support. Then you order the replacement part. As I said, this can be done out of SOS directly, and troubleshooting the device by either device or component replacement, or sending the defective device to Austria via DHL. But for all our African partners, we really don't see a situation whereby you need to send defective devices to Austria. All you need to do is to get in touch with our qualified FSPs, especially our FSP Plus partners, and you're able to get the required spare parts. And if you are not familiar with servicing of inverters, they can also do this for you at a fee that will be covered for by Fronius if the device is still under warranty. So as I said before, we have now about 70 FSPs spread out across Africa, and this can also be accessed straight from the Fronius website by conducting an FSP partner search. And as a net customer or an installer who is not very familiar with the replacement process, you can easily locate within your neighborhood or your country who is best suited to assist you if you have a problem with our Fronius inverter that you're not able to handle on your own. So I think that brings me to the end of my section, and I'll be handing over to my colleague, Mohammed Sidat, to take us through the remaining part of the presentation. Mohammed, please come in.
Thank you, David, for your very good part of your presentation. Before we proceed, I'll just like to launch a quick poll. I'll really appreciate if everybody could share their inputs. Okay, so the question is, are you familiar with inverter part replacements? Please select an option. Yes, you have done service replacements before. Yes, but not with Fronius. And the last one, no experience, but interested to learn more. Okay, I'm going to keep the line open for 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm closing. Okay, I'd like to share the results with you. Okay, as you can see, the majority of today's audience have said that they have no experience but are interested to learn more, which is really good because this webinar is really catering towards that need. And yeah, so a good minority of you have said you have done replacements, and some have done inverter replacements but not with Fronius. Okay, back to the presentation. Moving on to what components can be replaced. Okay, firstly, I'm going to show you what components can be replaced on our SNAP inverter series. And for this, we're going to use the Simon 20 kilowatts inverter as an example. For the SNAP inverter series, what can be replaced will be very similar across the entire SNAP inverter range, with some obvious changes, for example, in the different power variants of the AC board, filter board, etc. But for today's webinar, we're just going to show you the components of one snap inverter, which will be the SIMO 20 kilowatt unit. As you can see, the extruded view of the SIMO 20 kilowatt units. These are all the internal parts inside the SIMO 20 kilowatt inverter. And all of these parts can be ordered from Fronius to be replaced, okay? And what you are looking at here is a total combination of over 70 items that can be replaced in a snap inverter. So again, with Fronius, we use the topology of board replacement. So, you know, if something is wrong with your inverter, you do not need to send the entire inverter back to Fronius and then wait for 2 to 3 weeks to receive a new inverter. That is not needed, because with Fronius, we can diagnose the error exactly, and you can come to the conclusion of which specific board needs to be replaced. Okay, and then order that specific board from your FSP Plus partner, which will then do the replacement for you. Okay, so some important points to note on the snap inverter. All of these items can be replaced. Each replaceable item is given a unique item number, and this is very important because this is the item number that the FSP Plus partner will use in order to obtain from Fronius. A lot of these components are already stocked on hand, so in their warehouse for our FSP Plus partners. So this ensures that if you do have an issue locally with the Fronius snap inverter, you can get a board replacement within 1 or 2 days. You do not need to wait for a shipment to come from Austria and then wait for all the shipping clearances, etc. That is not needed. So what are the most common replacements for our snap inverters? So throughout my experience with Fronius, and you know, through all the cases and records that I have had a look at, these items are the most common items to be replaced on a Fronius inverter if something does go wrong. Okay, what could go wrong? I mean, you could get lightning strikes, transients from the grid, and at the end of the day, if your inverter is not adequately protected from DC and AC surges, you could have a fault developing. Okay, these common items that could be replaced are, for example, the SIMO DC12 board. Basically, what this means is SIMO is the snap inverter, DC stands for the type of board, and 12 stands for the power variant. So this would be a 12 kilowatt board. Okay, so your DC and AC boards could be a potential replacement if they, for example, get struck by lightning. Also, your filter boards could be something else that you could look at. The receiver board, which is the display board, okay, which is connected to the data manager. And the way the receiver board could get blown is that if you have not adequately protected your comms against lightning surges. Okay. Also your internal fans, external fans, again, it could happen that you need to replace them. Also your front cover and your DATCOM cover. But as I told you earlier on, you can pretty much replace over 70 plus items on a snap inverter. Okay, but these again are the most common items you will most likely need to replace if something does go wrong. Okay, moving on to the replacement components for our new our new Gen 24 Plus inverter. Okay, so we're going to use the SIMO 10 kilowatts inverter unit here as an example. Okay, so for this inverter unit, we have over 30 items that can be replaced. Okay, and these are all indicated here on the right-hand side of the screen. Each replaceable item is given a unique item number, okay, which is a unique identifier. And the FSP Plus partner will stock the main components that could need replacing in the future. So what could be the most common replacements for the Gen 24 Plus inverter? It could be the really unfortunate event that you need to replace the whole inverter. Maybe as an example, you were transporting this inverter in your van, and for example, you didn't secure the inverter properly, and maybe the inverter fell on the road and broke. Okay, in that case, the front cover will crack. I mean, the power boards will crack, the back plate will most likely crack, and at the end of the day, it would actually be more economical to just replace the entire inverter as opposed to ordering each individual part separately. Okay, but it's very rare that you'll have to replace the entire inverter. Okay. Also, you can replace the power units. So with the Gen 24 Plus, when it comes to the power unit, it's a bit different compared to the snap inverters. With the snap inverters, we had 3 or 4 AC or DC boards. Okay, Whereas with the Gen 24 Plus, we just have one power unit, and inside that power unit, it contains all your DC, AC, and filter boards inside that power unit. Okay. Okay, we also have the pilot card. The pilot card is the communication card, which can also be replaced. We also do have the inverter cover that can be replaced, and also the fan, which can also be replaced. Just remember, with the Gen 24 Plus, we will only have one fan, and that is the fan that can be visible on the exterior of the inverter. Okay, so moving on to exchange of components for snap inverters. Before you do any exchange of components, whether it be for snap inverters or whether it be for the Gen 24 Plus, please make sure that you do attend to these safety rules, which is again very important. Please make sure that you deactivate all poles. So basically what that means is, please make sure that you disconnect the inverter from the AC side completely. And please also make sure that you put the DC disconnector switch on the Fronius snap inverter or Gen 24 Plus on the off state. Okay. And in that way, you will also deactivate your DC side. Okay, it's also advisable to pull the inverter off the wall when you are going to do any servicing. Also, please protect against any reactivation. So please, tell anybody on site that you are going to be doing servicing. Also, please check your voltage on your AC and DC side, which I will show you just now. Also, please make sure that your grounding and short-circuited is taken care of. And also, please cover surroundings and oppositely live line parts. And please note that you do follow any local safety test regulations. And please also make sure that you are responsible to execute the field safety test safely. Okay, before you can service the Fronius snap inverter, you will need to access the boards inside the inverter. And in order to do that, you need to unplug the snap inverter from the back plates, put it on a flat surface, and then you need to unscrew the front cover of the Fronius snap inverter. Okay, I'm just going to give you an example of the low voltage circuits and components on a Fronius snap inverter that might need to be replaced in the future. Starting with the receiver card, this is the display card of the Fronius inverter. What's also very important to note is this little print over here, which is called the memory print. And this little print over here stores the inverter serial number, and it also stores what type inverter it is, okay, and also how many kilowatt hours this inverter has produced. So whenever you do replace a receiver card, please make sure that you break this print and put the old print on the new receiver card. Okay, it's kind of like the unique identifier of the inverter. Okay, you can also replace the data manager, and you can also replace the 12-volt internal and external axial fans. You can also replace the high voltage circuits in a Fronius snap inverter. So starting off with the filter board. The filter board is the first point of contact between any high voltage or low voltage AC or DC components of the inverter. Okay, so if you look at the bottom left of this filter board, this is where your DC will enter the inverter, okay? Get filtered via a combination of inductors and capacitors to ensure that you now have a nice clean DC voltage, which will then go to the DC board. On the right-hand side of this filter board is where we find the AC filtering circuits. And this part of the circuit here is responsible for filtering your sinusoidal signal, which is coming from the AC board, and to ensure that you have a harmonic that does not have a lot of subharmonics on it. So you have a nice clean signal, which will then be supplied to the load. Okay, moving on to the AC board. This AC board is responsible for DC to AC conversion, okay? So this is where all the IGBTs will be located. You can't actually see the IGBTs on the top of the AC board, but they are located at the bottom of the AC board, okay? And the reason for that is to ensure that they have really close ties with the internal heatsink of the snap inverter. Okay, what's very important on the AC board is that you can see that there is a whole bunch of capacitors, which are these little black cylindrical pieces. And these capacitors need to be adequately discharged before you can even touch the circuit, which I will obviously talk about a bit later on in this presentation. And then also looking at the DC board. The DC board basically takes the DC from the filter board and then either steps up or steps down the DC voltage in order to make sure that it falls within the MPPT tracking range. Okay, before you remove any AC board or DC board from a Fronius inverter, please make sure that you measure the intermediate circuit voltage. Okay, you might ask, what is the intermediate circuit? The intermediate circuit is combined of IGBTs, these capacitors, resistors, and inductors. And the intermediate circuit is responsible for holding an adequate charge whenever the IGBTs do switch from its on and off state, okay, in order to achieve your sinusoidal signal. Okay, because of this, you need to make sure that you do measure these DC points, okay, before you unplug the AC board or the DC board from the inverter. Okay, so if you refer to these points on the left, a dangerous voltage can be present in the intermediate circuit for a long time, even if you disconnect your AC and DC. Okay, and this is because the voltage comes from your capacitors. Okay, remember, once a capacitor, even if you disconnect it from its power source, a capacitor can still hold charge for a certain period of time. Okay, so please make sure that your capacitors do discharge. And with Fronius inverters, we have a discharge circuit installed internally. And this discharge circuit is composed of a bunch of resistors. Okay, so this will allow you to achieve an RC circuit, which will then allow you to discharge your capacitors. You need to measure the intermediate circuit voltage with a suitable measuring device. Okay, so with a voltmeter. So for example, on the Eco, this is the points that you do need to measure to make sure that your capacitors are discharged. And with the SIMO, these will be the points. Make sure that the voltage must not exceed 30 volts DC. Okay, if it does not exceed 30 volts DC, it means that the circuit is now safe to touch and the circuit boards can be removed from the circuit. Okay, usually it takes a few seconds to a few minutes in order for that voltage to drop down to about 30 volts DC. Okay, so please make sure that you do check those points. Okay, moving on to the exchange of components for the Gen 24 Plus. Okay, it's a bit different to the Snap inverter, but nonetheless, fairly simple. In order to do this, you need to remove the inverter cover over here. You also need to remove the DATCOM cover, and you also need to remove the pilot card over there. Okay, you then need to remove the Wago clamps, which are those orange clamps over there. Also the separation unit, which separates your DC from your comms, from your AC. And once you've done all of that, it will now make the possibility to remove the power stack now possible. Also screw off the grounding cable and also make sure that you remove any power cables, and then you can then remove your power units. As you can see, please make sure that your DC disconnector is on the off position before you do remove this power units. Okay, that's your DC disconnector over there. Okay, so with the Gen 24 Plus, you will need to, if something does go wrong with one of the circuits inside the power stack, you will need to replace the entire power stack. Okay, please make sure that you leave certain items at the customer site, such as the back cover, front cover, pilot card, any screws, etc. And you only send the power stack back to our Fronius System Partner Plus, which will then give you a new power stack, which you can then go to site and do the replacement for. Okay, so as I alluded to earlier on, you will return the power stack back to Fronius, and when Fronius does send you the newest power stack, please make sure that you do the licensing of the new power stack on the Gen 24 Plus. Okay, so that's all the content from my side. But before we move on to answer all your questions, I'd just like to point out that we have a lot of further information with regard to servicing of our inverters, and that all can be found on our Fronius website. We also have a YouTube channel where you can find all our webinars that were done for Fronius Sub-Saharan Africa, and you can watch all those webinars. Okay, so please make sure that you do take notes of these numbers on your screen. Again, if you need to contact us, please make sure that you do use the correct contact person, and you will get all your queries answered. But from my side, I'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar. We will be keeping the line open for another 5 minutes to answer any questions. But otherwise, I will see you next week, where we will discuss the new Fronius commercial inverter, which will be the Fronius Tyro. Thank you and bye.